So if you've been following Spirit of the Dog Rescue on social media, then you may have noticed we've been getting lots and lots of questions about what it looks like to live with an exempted dog, how your lifestyle might change, what that might look like. And I've posted up saying that we're going to speak to a dog caregiver who already has a dog who's exempted under the breed-specific legislation. So thank you very much for joining us, Andy. You've got beautiful Rubble, who I'm very, very fond of. And unfortunately, his life has been massively impacted by BSL and this law. So do you want to start by telling us a little bit about Rubble? Obviously, he's a member of your family. He's been brought up around your kids, and he's fallen under this law and got tangled up in that. So do you want to tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, sure. So Rubble was still very young when he came into my life. I didn't know. I knew what BSL was, i.e. I can remember Googling the acronym and finding out what the letters meant, but that's about as far as it was. And it wasn't something that I didn't know anything about, but it was something that I didn't know any details about until it sort of happened, I suppose. So it was quite clear to me anyway that, you know, even Rubble as a baby looked like what most people would say a red-nosed pit bull looks like. So I was always kind of, you know, a little bit dubious that something might happen. But yeah, he was only with me for 7 weeks, I think 7 or 8 weeks before he was actually seized. But the process, as daunting and as scary as it was at the time, when I look back at it now with hindsight, if I had to go for it again tomorrow, obviously I'd have that understanding, but it's quite a simple process. It's the fear that makes it so bad. It's the worry and not knowing and kind of the ignorance, I suppose. That's the really worrying part. The actual exemption process, as long as your dog passes their assessment, obviously, is fairly simple. And I mean, I know that you've got lots of cases where the time amount that is spent in kennels and all that kind of stuff is absolutely insane. But that's usually because there isn't someone that's come forward for the dog, or there are numerous complications with that person, or they get so far along the process and then they step out and they go back to square one. It's not usually because of the dog, sadly.
Tell us what happened the day that Rubble got seized and what that process looked like for you all the way through.
So personally, I was quite lucky when Rubble was seized, in the sense that although it was not a very nice experience, I mean, to cut a very long story short, I was at work. I got a phone call from a not very nice police officer to tell me that he was stood outside my door. They had good information to suspect that I had an illegal type dog inside the property, and I basically had two choices. I could come home and let them in and do this amicably, or they could go away and use the evidence that they'd already obtained to get themselves a warrant and come back and essentially enter my property without me. So obviously I went for the former, but at the time I didn't drive, and I was, like I said, I was at work. So I explained this, and the DLO, luckily for me, was a really, really top guy. He came and picked me up himself. And on the drive back, which is about half an hour or so, he kind of explained the forms, the process, what was going to happen. He kind of gave me a worst case scenario of, if I go in there and I think that Rubble is type, then I will be taking him today. This is what happens. This is what you need to do. And the advice that I was given was to get him insured as quickly as possible and to book him in for a neuter. He was already microchipped, so I didn't necessarily have to worry about that one. But he was still a very young dog. He was only 7 months. So literally within 10 minutes of Rubble being taken, which was a pretty horrible experience, I can't lie. That's never going to be nice for anyone, even if you have been, you know, told what's going to happen and you've had it explained to you. It still doesn't make it any better. It's still not a very nice process. So within 10 minutes or so of him being gone and me stopping crying, I rang Dogs Trust, got my insurance sorted out straight away, no problems whatsoever. It's really simple process, 25 quid a year. They're really easy to deal with. That was simple. I rang my vets, who actually, in sort of their credit, refused to neuter Rubble because he was only 7 odd months, and they wanted me to wait. So I kind of sent this letter of reference that they'd written for me, saying that we're not willing at this moment to neuter him due to his age, to the police, along with my copy of my insurance certificate. The same day, it wasn't actually, I tell a lie, it wasn't the insurance certificate because that takes 24 hours. It was just a receipt of payment to Dogs Trust. But it was all the same day. You know, within an hour or so of him being taken, I'd already sent both of these things off. And I'd taken a photo of a muzzle that I'd gone and brought as well. So a lot of it for me was about intent. That's how the DLO explained it to me. He said, most of the dogs that don't get returned to people don't get returned because the people don't deserve the dogs back. If you show us that, you know, this is what you want going forward, and as long as the dog meets the criteria, then you'll get him back. And that's exactly what happened. But essentially, the process is nowhere near as, I think if you take the emotion out of it, which is obviously very difficult. Like I said, I had the whole thing explained to me. This is what's potentially going to happen. And it was still a massive shock when he came and put a lead on my dog and walked him out of my house. Like, it still felt terrible. But if you take the emotion out of the situation, the process is pretty simple. It really is. It's not a huge amount of money. Obviously, if you need to get your dog neutered, then that's a decent expense. But the dog's with the police. So you've got to find that money. For the most part, you've just got to show the intent. So you could go to your vets and say, look, I want to set up a payment plan to get my dog neutered in 2 months' time, whatever. And as long as you've got some letter of intent that says this person's come in, they haven't paid any money yet, but they've set up this is what they want. Like that's it really shows that you're willing to make that effort, and intent really does make a difference. Same with the insurance. 25 quid is not a lot of money, even if you've got nothing in your bank account to borrow off someone to get your dog insured for a year. And again, you'll get that acknowledgement through really quickly. You can send that over to the DLO almost straight away and say, look, this is how important my dog is to me, because this is the effort. I only knew about this a few hours ago, and I've already done this, this, and this. And then when you go to court as well, the magistrate will get informed that within a very short space of time, you obliged with everything that you were asked to, and all of that's going in your favour. So like I said, it's a very scary process, but if you take the emotion out of it and you kind of are a bit prepared and you know what's going to happen, the process is fairly simple. It is just a case of paying some money.
We don't know at the moment, when it comes specifically to the Bully XL type dogs, whether they are all going to be seized and going to kennels, whether you just need to do your exemption and they'll only get seized if you've not done it. We don't actually have any official information about that yet. So we're just talking about what's happened with you.
Yeah, and I mean, I mean, the fact that you've mentioned about the kennels as well, because that's a really key point about, obviously there are many cases of dogs that spend considerable amounts of time in kennels. I was really lucky in the fact that Rubble came back 4 nights, 5 days. That's all Rubble was gone. So I was extremely lucky in that sense. But I also had it pointed out a couple of times that intent that I showed from day one really mattered too. And for a lot of people that are worried about this, especially when we're talking about the XL Bully going forward, if you've got a dog already that you know is going to pass temperament, you've got a really well-behaved, well-trained dog, and you already go and get them insured, you already start muzzle training them, you already start mentally preparing yourself that possibly there's a chance that a police officer and a DLO are going to come into your house and take your dog away for a short amount of time. And the faster that you fill in these bits and the faster that you prove yourself, the faster your dog will come back. And sadly, like I said, we don't know, we're just speculating, but that if that is the case, just start thinking about that's going to happen. It's crap. It's really horrible, and like it's never going to stop being like that. But the more that you mentally prepare yourself and your dog, the quicker that they'll come back to you. The main reason that a lot of these dogs are sadly in kennels for as long as they are is due to the people that are supposed to be responsible for them either pulling out, never being responsible for them, some other medical problem happening, a death in the family, something slows down the process. And the problem is then it goes back to the beginning, and a lot of people don't want to start from the beginning.
As you know, many years ago, over a decade ago now, I worked in a kennel, lived on site of a kennels where dogs were seized and taken, and some of the dogs that I looked after had been there for 2 years, and initially the caregivers had decided they wanted to go through this process of exemption. By the time it's got to court, they've got another dog, they've had a baby, they decide that they don't want. So please don't do that to your dog. If your dog does end up in police kennels for any reason and you don't think you're going to be able to offer them exemption, offer them a safe place to go, then please let people know sooner rather than later. I had to work with dogs who were euthanized after 2 years in kennel, and some of them really weren't coping there very well. So please don't, if that is your situation, please, I will say, just don't draw it out longer.
Yeah, I mean, I'd absolutely second that. We've already got that motivation of like, look, I know I've got an XL bully. There's no argument. So in a few weeks' time, this is something that I'm going to really have to pay attention to. They're a well-behaved dog. They're well-trained. They're dog-friendly. All these kind of things. I'm going to go out. I'm going to go and get myself some muzzle. I mean, if you've got the money, and one of the best things I could ever do is go to one of the bespoke places, measure their faces, and get one built for the face. Especially if we're talking about a young dog that's going to have to wear this every day for the next 10 years. Yeah, get a proper made muzzle. Don't just go and get. I mean, a Baskerville Ultra or something like that is great in short term at a moment's notice to go and prove to the DLO, look, I've gone and got myself a muzzle. But long term, think about how many times a day you walk your dog currently, and think that potentially you might have to muzzle them every single time. So if you walk your dog 4 times a day, 4 times 7 times 365. That's how many times your dog's got to wear that muzzle. Yeah, make sure it's comfortable. Make sure it fits properly. Make sure that they're not, because otherwise what you'll find is, and it does happen, is they will stop wanting to go for a walk because walk is associated with muzzle.
For those people who are a little bit overwhelmed about muzzles, which one to use, how to fit them, how to muzzle train, there are a few resources that I can recommend straight away that you have a look at. There is a podcast that was recorded, and if you look at the Bull Breed Behaviourist podcast, they've got a whole podcast on there about different types of muzzle, informing you about what they're all like. So definitely, if you need information from scratch and you've got no knowledge at all, then definitely dive into that podcast. If you want to look at, I mean, there's lots of different bespoke muzzle businesses that make them. My recommendation would be the Muzzle Movement. Go and have a look at their page, especially if you've got access to Instagram or they've got a website. Loads of good information on there that will show you the pant room and the measurements.
One of the greatest things, because you'll need yourself like a fabric tape measure to measure the faces.
Okay, yeah.
We've got Christmas coming up. Christmas crackers are a great place to find these. If you start looking out for stuff now, they're an ideal place to find a tape measure of perfect length so you can measure their faces. And almost all of these sites now, they've got charts. They make it really simple for you. I mean, when I first ordered his muzzle, I thought it was going to be really complicated. You can pick colors, you can add gem, all this stuff, but actually it's dead simple. It really is. It's easy as customizing like a phone case or something like that. It's all just drag and drop menus. Really simple. The hardest part is getting the dog to stay still while you measure the face.
Yeah, and I've measured dogs for muzzles before, where I've actually videoed me doing it and sent it to the person who's making the muzzle. So when it comes to training a dog or desensitizing a dog to having something on their face, it can take a little while. It can be overwhelming for them. What I recommend is Muzzle Up Project. So Google Muzzle Up Project. If you go on their website, there are tons of resources to help your dog feel comfortable during that process. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add. So what else did you have to do, Andy?
So essentially the factors that need to be is that you need to have a fixed address that you have permission to keep the dog at. So whether that's your own home or if you rent, then landlord's permission or whoever, as long as you've got that. Your house needs to be secure, which I'm assuming most people's houses usually are secure, but that includes the back garden. And we're not talking like 3 foot 4 foot, it's got to be a 6 foot fence. And that's got to be secure. That can't be like chain link or anything like that. It's got, as far as I'm aware, it's got to be opaque so you can't see through it.
Okay.
It's not just got to be 6 foot. As far as I'm aware, it can't be a chain link fence. Yeah. But other than that, and once you've got the insurance done, if they already are neutered or spayed, obviously that's another box ticked. Essentially, it's about being muzzled and on a lead at all times whilst in public, and that includes whilst in a car. I mean, I've seen quite a few people recently on TikTok saying that it's harsh that they've got to be kept on a lead in the car, but it's a legal requirement in this country for dogs to be restrained in a car anyway. So it just tells me that a lot of people weren't aware of that law, thinking it's harsh for them when it's actually a bog standard legal requirement.
Probably a bit more difficult with the muzzle in the car because it's just
it is, and again, it's one of those things that so Rubble isn't too bad anymore since I learned to drive, but before I learned to drive and he ever used to have to go anywhere, but would always get car sick. So obviously in a muzzle, that's not the greatest of fun. And obviously the other concern that you had is the 2 or 3 times where he actually was sick, we have to stop to clean him up. Well, by the letter of the law, by getting him out of the car to take his muzzle off to clean him up, you're technically breaching. I mean, it's pedantic, but technically, by the letter of the law, you're breaking it. So, like, there's all these sorts of things that they're really serious about, but actually, the process that puts a lot of people off isn't serious as long as you stick by what you have to do. And a lot of it, I think, another big part of it is when you come into muzzle training, a lot of it is about you having a little bit of extra confidence too, because they're not going to have it. And I think one of the things that dogs feel probably the most vulnerable about when they're going through muzzle training is that there's so many of their senses that you're taking away from them. I mean, the obvious one is their ability to defend themselves, but it's you see the difference on times when I can take Rubble to somewhere private and he doesn't have to wear his muzzle. He spends the entire time sniffing. He doesn't run off. He spends the entire time sniffing because there's a restriction to his sniffing with a muzzle on, regardless of what that muzzle is. So just little tiny things like that you will notice. And like I said, I think that's why it's quite important that the muzzle becomes something that it's got a positive association, because I've known dogs that have literally started refusing to go for a walk because they can't leave the house without a muzzle, and so they just won't. And it's understandable. But yeah, I would like to reiterate in terms of money that I constantly see people be told that if this is something that happens to them, that they have to get themselves a solicitor, they have to get themselves some sort of legal representation, and all of a sudden the potential budget needed is into the thousands. Now, I'm never going to tell anyone anywhere that they don't need legal representation. I think that would be foolish, but I certainly didn't need any legal representation. And to be perfectly honest, unless there's some sort of criminal element to your case, or your dog has attacked someone and there's a victim involved somewhere and it's kind of out of your hands in that sense, no one is ever going to represent your dog better than you are. No one is ever going to be able to explain how well you are going to oblige with these things better than you are. So all of that money, unless you're fighting some sort of criminal prosecution, I don't understand why you need it. You need the money to exempt. You need your £25 dog's trust insurance. And if your dog's not neutered, you need the cost of neutering. That's how much it's going to cost you in your first 12 months. And obviously, you've never got to pay for the neuter again. Your muzzle's potentially going to last you up to 10 years because that's the guarantees that they're coming with. They've already been chipped. So the only thing that you've got to pay, again, after that is your £25 a year. You don't pay your exemption fee yearly, which is another thing that I've seen people incorrectly state. You only pay that once. The only fee that reoccurs on a yearly basis is your £25 dog's trust insurance. And I'm sorry, but if you can't raise £25 in 12 months, you shouldn't have a dog of any description. And I haven't got a problem saying that. So when I see people that say, I can't get my dog exempted because it's too much money, where do you think these costs are? Just take the BSL aspect out and just think that your dog suddenly gets very unwell overnight, or they get hit by a car, or they get involved in a fight at the park and the other dog's not insured. You're going to find that £400, £500, £600, even if you have to take out a short-term loan to do it because that dog's a member of your family, right? Well, it's exactly the same process. And we're not, I think a lot of people do get put off when they think they need to raise thousands of pounds for legal costs. I mean, I can remember from my days in rescue where I'd see posts that have been shared and they'll say, thank God that that this hasn't happened to me because I could never raise £7,000. You don't need to. This is a specific case. But that's the idea that people get, that they think that it's going to cost thousands, and so they give up at the very first hurdle, thinking, well, I can never raise thousands, and the chances are you'll never need to. Right, someone like me, if you're a single parent and your kids love your dog to bits, and you're in a low-income family, you can still get your dog exempted. Don't think that you have been ruled out because of the class system. That is not how this is. And like I said, a huge part of this is intent. So if you're on benefits and you've got no money and your vet is the PDSA, go in and say, look, this is what's happened to me. I need to get my dog neutered or spayed. I haven't got a lot of money at the moment. Can you help me? And they will help you. And they can give you a letter of declaration that you can then send to the DLO and say, look, this is my situation. I haven't got a pot to piss in, basically, but I have gone to the vets. They have agreed to help me. I am showing you that this is what we want. I am showing you my intentions. terms. I am showing you that I'm interested, and I'm showing you that I'm going to oblige and I'm going to adhere to the program. And that means so much going forward. I mean, it sounds very silly, but like they always tell someone to wear a suit to court, because punctuality means quite a lot. It really does. So you showing your intent and showing this has happened to me today, and by the end of today, you're going to have this, this, and this on your table. Even if no money's left the hands of anyone, I've got no money, but I've emailed the Dogs Trust and I've emailed the vets, and I've got these letters of intent to show this is what I want to do. That is going to go a long way forward, and everybody can do that. Everybody can send a couple of emails, and it will make a big difference going forward. And you know, same as I'm not sort of like telling anyone to not spread information about cases and all that sort of stuff, but a lot of the people that are telling everyone you need to raise thousands, please stop doing it. Like, tell them that in specific cases, yeah, it does cost thousands of pounds, in the same time that there are certain court cases that run into millions, but not every court case runs into millions. So if we could try and break that stigma that most of these exemptions actually aren't running into even hundreds of pounds, let alone thousands.
Yeah, that's good to know.
It doesn't put so many people off then.
Yeah, I've had, so the other thing I've had as a rescue, I've had people phoning me up saying things like, the first thing I hear is, what are we going to do? A dog has no quality of life if they're out in a muzzle. I would say just have a look at a lot of the dogs out there that are already under this exemption, having a lovely life, having a great quality of life. And if you need ideas and tips, maybe we can share some content on how to make life fun in a muzzle, because they are really important piece of safety equipment.
Yeah, I mean, you're the really important part to sort of talk about as well. And obviously, I totally understand that sort of. I mean, it is a restriction, a huge restriction, and it does obviously. There are certain places, you know. I mean, I don't know for every places, but somewhere like Haven or Butlins, for example, I could never take Rubble to, because he would have to spend his entire time muzzled, whether he was out or in, because the caravan would be classed as public, you see. But in your own home, your dog is your dog. So yeah, okay, I understand that on when you go out for walks and when you go into public places, that there is a restriction on that dog, but that restriction keeps the dog alive. When they're in your own home, that dog is everything you want them to be, or they want to be. Yeah, it is frustrating, but at the same time, you have to look at it and think, muzzle or dead. Those are the two choices that we're offered. Make
the best of the situation, and there's lots of ways to do that.
There isn't really an option, and let's be perfectly honest again. It's not us that are suffering this; it's the dogs. So we can look at them in the same way that I can look at him sometimes and think, "You're not enjoying this, are you?" And it's probably because of the muzzle. But at the same time, it might just be because it's wet. It might just be because he doesn't want to go out. We don't know. So a lot of it is just our own presuppositions, as opposed to, I mean, the dogs are much happier being alive than dead. I can tell you that for sure. So if you said to me that you're going to have to wear this particular thing on your face, but you're not going to have to be put down, I'd take that.
So yes, we are getting calls from people who are concerned about what their dog's life is going to look like when they have to wear a muzzle. But I'm going to find some really nice resources and some nice pages that show dogs who have to wear muzzles already and what their caregivers are doing to make sure that they've still got that good quality of life, they've still got their 5 freedoms, they're still able to exhibit their natural behaviours and do all the things that we want to see them doing. Some of the other panic calls that I've been getting are from people who have either called or taken their dog to the police or the vets. There's people phoning saying that their vets are refusing to put their dogs to sleep because their dogs are healthy, and that is a completely understandable response.
In the same way that you would expect you not to be able to go and take your dog to the vets to be euthanized because you want to go on holiday, it's not really any different. It's only for selfish reasons. I can completely understand that there's an argument to be made about a quality of life, but you're responsible for that quality of life. So you make sure, okay, yeah, they have to be muzzled outside the house, but everything else, that's on you. So if you're so concerned about their quality of life, then that concern should be about what you're providing for them.
I mean, some of the people that I've had on the phone are people of no fixed address who are not going to be able to exempt their dog. They're not able to get rescues to take their dogs in. So that's a very real concern. And
yeah, I can understand that one. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you're on the street, so to speak, and you haven't got a fixed address, then that's a real concern, because there aren't too many things that you can do. I mean, you will have to have a property inspection. So it's all well and good saying, you know, use a family member's address. But the whole point of the address is that they come and check that your house and your garden are secure, which means the dog will need to reside there. So out of all the things, out of all the actual obstacles, not having a fixed address is probably the most difficult. I think everything else, even if you've got a not brilliant criminal record, there are compromises that can be made and everything else based on you as an owner, you as a keeper. But without having an address, that really is a problem, yes.
At this moment in time, November 2023, we actually don't have all the information about how this is going to look, and that's police officers don't have this information, vet staff don't necessarily have this information. It's an unknown. There's a lot of unknown things here for everyone right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I mean this without any disrespect meant whatsoever. Without any inclusions of the XL Bully, as it stands right now in November 2023, the police force and the Vets Association don't have a great understanding of BSL. Full stop. Let's be perfectly honest about this. The vast majority of the police force who don't work within the DLO department or whatever, who don't work with dogs, don't know anything about this legislation. And why would they?
Yeah.
In the same way that, you know, you don't know how your car works. You just know that when you turn your key, it starts. That's it. Well, that's kind of as much as they need to know. If they've never had a case that involved a dog being seized, why would they know anything about BSL? So I think we need to take that into consideration too, that at the moment, nobody knows. I mean, a vet isn't going to know anything before you do. Everyone's going to more or less know this information at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. So please don't turn up at the police station with your dog and present your dog at a police station. You would just really need to keep an eye on what's happening as things unfold and
I mean, you're much better off using the next 6 weeks or so. Obviously, the things we discussed, you know, training the muzzle, making sure insurance is in place, speaking to your vets about neuter and spay and that kind of thing. But also one of the other things that I would encourage, especially if you think that your dog may struggle on their walks and wearing a muzzle is going to make a big difference, find somewhere that you can go, which is private, that you can hire, that you can rent, that, you know, potentially it's going to cost you a fee, but once a week, once a month, once a fortnight, however long, or even better if you've got a friend with a bit of private land that you can put some fencing up. As long as it's private land and you've got permission, or you pay a fee and you use one of the dog track places that are all secure, these are things that you should be thinking about rather than hassling the police or the vets. Use your time constructively to think, right, for the next however many years, this is going to be life. How can we best prepare for it?
Absolutely. That's a really good point. Thank you. And if you are in the veterinary profession and you're wondering where you stand and you're wanting to know more, follow Shakira Miles on Instagram. Also go and have a look at Dr. Sophie White and the Bully Boardroom. I'll say on my phone. The Bully Boardroom. They're collating as much information as possible. It says here the purpose of this project is to provide signposting and pool resources to help the veterinary community best help and support their clients and patients who are impacted by the expansion of the current breed-specific legislation. This is a community, not-for-profit project. So if you are in the veterinary industry and you're wanting information, keep an eye on the Bully Boardroom, Dr. Sophie White, and thank you, Dr. White, for these resources, which are hopefully going to really help vets understand what's going on. But equally, yeah, it is difficult at the moment. Lots of really distressing phone calls, but we hope that what we've discussed today does settle some of your minds somewhat. And if you'd be happy to revisit this at some point, if we do get any questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if anyone wants to ask Andy anything specific.
The one positive, because there's not a lot of positives I know at the moment, that people will be looking at this situation with a lot of worry and a lot of fear, and it's totally understandable. The one positive that I can see that potentially will come out of this is, you know, like I said, with the police force, with the vets, even myself, before Rubble was seized, I didn't know. I knew what BSL letters stood for, and that's as far as it went. So my understanding grew because I needed to learn, I needed to understand. And looking at the amount of people that are talking about this right now, yeah, okay, it's emotive, it's out of fear, it's out of concern, it's out of worry. But I'd like to think this time next year we'll have 30–40% of the United Kingdom that finally understand what this legislation is, what it entails, what it means, and why they should be against it. Whereas right now, it's only the people that understand it that are against it. Everyone else will go, oh yeah, it's not very nice to the dogs, and that's the end of the conversation. Whereas the more people start to learn, and the more people are kind of forced to learn in the same way that I was, it's a traumatic experience. But that information then, and you can have conversations every single time that I have a conversation with anyone about Rubble's situation, they empathise. I've never ever met anyone that said, oh, that's the best thing for him, isn't it? Everyone says, wow, I didn't realise how serious it was. I didn't realise how strict it was. I didn't realise those were the repercussions. So most people have no clue. And like I said, it's not, I don't mean this disrespectfully, and this includes the vet service, the police service, and a lot of people even within dog rescue. Unless they've been through it or have some experience of someone close to them who has, or they've had a dog through their books that has, their understanding is minimal. And the more people that are learning and the more people that are researching this, at least going forward, that's more heads that can come together and say, look, we've got a solution, or we've got a compromise here. We've got a counter argument we can put forward. Because at the moment, as much as I don't want to say this and end on a negative note, we have to look at this seriously. The entire time that I've had Rubble, I've been obviously campaigning against BSL. I want the whole legislation scrapped. The fact that the Bully XL is being added to it should really let us know that there is no current plans at all in any way, shape or form to remove this legislation. If anything, it's being strengthened. So we need to look at alternative methods that we can gain a little bit of control back here. We need to look at solutions or practical ways that we can actually challenge this, because asking them to scrap BSL is not going to happen. Not in any way, shape or form. Not anytime soon anyway. And that should be confirmed by the fact that they're adding another breed to it. They're not looking at removing a breed or lowering it or dropping the escalation. They're upping it. So we need to take that into consideration and think, what else can we do going forward? What can we look at in terms of legislation that can get changed? It's going to benefit people and the dogs. Little small changes are not the best, but that's the sort of thing that we can actually achieve. Whereas if we genuinely think this is just going to get scrapped overnight, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. But there are definitely things that we can do, and there are definitely coalitions we can put together where we put our understanding together and finally, as a community, so to speak, actually look at ways that we can do things about this. I mean, it may well come about that going forward, somewhere where dogs can go and exercise, an exercise yard or something like that is set up primarily for exempted dogs, because nothing like that, as far as I'm aware, exists. There are potentially tens of thousands of dogs now that are going to get added to the dog index, which also means that there's going to be a need for more muzzles, more places for them to be secure, all of these different things. So we may well see an improvement in other aspects. It may well be now that I could pop down the road and hire half an hour for him, whereas at the moment that's a 45-minute drive. I mean, there may well be some other positive aspects, but I think the one thing that we can look at is that collectively we will finally have a better understanding of this legislation than we've ever had.
Thank you. That is a really good point. I've got a couple more things to add before we finish. Firstly, when you mentioned about a coalition, have you seen the work of APDOG, the All-Party Parliamentary Dog Advisory Welfare Group? I definitely think have a look at them, everyone, if you want to learn a little bit more about the work that's going on. They had a series of meetings in Parliament to discuss various solutions to this, and they're all working together to try and think of solutions, like you say, and changes in the legislation that's really going to make a big difference here and a big help. So APDOG, APDAWG.
And I'm not suggesting this is something that we work towards, because I actually think it would be very easy for them to quash. But just for an example, you'd be far better off putting all your time and energy into trying to get something like DNA evidence accepted. Because they're not going to scrap the legislation, but they may make an amendment to it. So some campaigning for something small, which adds a little bit more fairness, is definitely something we can achieve. And I think those are the avenues we've got to look at now. We're not going to bring this down anytime soon, so we need to find ways to work within it.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Kendall Shepherd, who is our lovely charity patron at Spirit of the Dog, She is, as you will already know, a vet and a behaviourist. She's an expert witness in court. This is really her expertise. I saw her say the other day that it would be really great if everyone whose dog is typed could actually do a DNA test, and then collectively we could look at all this data and just show how insane it is. Of course, at the moment it's not accepted in court, but if enough people do it and we can actually see those results, what a difference it would make. So if you
it would be interesting as
are in a
well
position
to
do
see.
that.
I mean, I don't actually know for sure. It would be interesting to see what is the genuine reason that they say no to DNA, because once upon a time it used to be that it was only like 98.7% or whatever, and there was too much of an element of doubt. Well, I'm sorry, time's moved on from those days, and we can give you 100% results if you pay enough money. So it would be interesting to see what the reluctance is. If it's cost, then I can understand, but that shouldn't stop an owner that's got the money. So it can't be cost relative, but it would be interesting to know what that genuine reason is. But something small like that, or some sort of whatever it is, some small changes that benefit both dog and keeper are definitely things that we should be looking at, yes, rather than just getting frustrated that they haven't scrapped it yet.
So we're all in absolute agreement that this law is draconian. It's a load of rubbish. It needs to be scrapped. It's completely unfair. And I posted up on social media some footage of when I was at the University of Liverpool at a seminar by Dr. Jim Crosby. And he's someone who investigates dog bites and fatalities, and he has been involved in more of these cases than anyone else in the world. And that footage got shared quite far, and he's obviously not in support of this ban whatsoever, and he was listing off lots of reasons why BSL needs to be scrapped, and it got a lot of support. A lot of the people who supported that post and what he was saying are breeders of large bully dogs. What is it that you would want to say to breeders in this moment in time who may be watching?
Polite face on. Seriously, as much as you're not going to want to hear this, you are the problem. We can look at everyone else. We can look at statistics. We can blame the media, but the problem is breeders. It really is. There aren't packs of stray dogs roaming this country, bringing each other into existence. This is human beings that are doing this, and even worse, these dogs are being bred specifically because of what they look like.
Unfortunately, there's been a lot of dogs who are sold as bully XLs, XL bullies, who have been seized as pit type before the XL ban even came in. So there is that similarity, and there is that confusion.
Absolutely. And
anyway.
I mean, I wish I could find the post, but there was a post that circulated about 18 months ago from someone that was essentially bragging that they'd found a loophole to breed pit bulls, and that was the XL bully. So yeah, they knew full well what they were doing. It's not an accident. It's not like two. I mean, in odd occasions maybe, but the vast majority of these dogs that are being seized as type have been bred to look that way, with zero repercussions for what happens. For there is no acknowledgement whatsoever. As long as that money comes in, what happened? And to be perfectly honest, anyone currently who has a pregnant bitch XL bully, you're exactly the same. You've known for more than long enough that this was coming in. So if you've got a bitch that's pregnant right now, you're part of the problem. And I'm sorry, until you realise that and accept some responsibility, you shouldn't get any sympathy from anyone, because you're making serious money, especially when we're talking about XL bullies that sell for $5-6 grand a pop. You're making extortionate amount of money from people that should make sure that dog stays safe for life. You should be the person that's paying the exemption fee. You should be the person that's paying for the insurance. You should be the person that's making sure that dog's neutered, because you're responsible for bringing them into the world. So I know it won't go down well, and people like to talk about backyard breeders and how terrible they are, but the problem is breeding. It's not the treatment. It's not necessarily the conditions. Obviously, all of those things are factors that make things worse or better. However, the fundamental wrong is to keep bringing these animals into existence purely for profit and greed. Yeah. The objectification of the dogs is the actual problem here. And that's not going to fix, regardless of any legislation that's brought in, unless that legislation is no more breeding at all, ever.
I mean, some people will say, you know, this is our breed, we love them. I mean, you and I, we both have bull breeds who we adore in our home, who have come to us through some form of rescue situation. We're bully fans. I mean, yours were raised with your children. So breeders that say, well, hang on a minute, that's not fair. What about the people that are breeding little spaniels and dogs like that?
But you know for a fact that there's no risk of any of those dogs being seized by the police for the way that they look. Whereas when you're breeding XL Bullies, especially at the moment, or for the last however many years you've been breeding type dogs, knowing full well what they are, advertising them on Gumtree as pit bulls and all that kind of thing, yeah, you know exactly what you're doing. I'm sorry, but yeah, there's no responsibility there from these people. They just take the money. And until that part of the problem gets addressed, we're always going to have this. And the potential issue that good breeders are going to have is that there is no difference between you. The problem is breeding. Like I said, the treatment, the conditions, it could be a 5-star breeder versus a 1-star breeder. I understand the difference in treatment, but fundamentally the wrong is exactly the same. Both sets of people are using their dogs as objects. They're using them as commodities, and they're profiting from the potential risk to those dogs. And that's when we're not being, you know, rude here. These are facts. Every time that you're breeding a dog that meets that criteria, there's a risk of them being killed. And you don't care about that. You know exactly what you're doing, and you're capitalizing on that niche of these dogs are dangerous, these dogs are this, which does sadly have a selling point with certain people, which are actually the people that should be banned from having dogs, which would solve most of these issues. But that's not what happens. And in the same way that all owners are tied with the same brush, I'm sorry, it happens with breeders too. So if we want a solution to this going forward, it's not better breeding conditions, it's that we stop breeding these dogs. And if that means that the likes of me and you, as bull breed lovers, one day in the future won't have one, that's not a negative thing if it means the end of this problem. Because at the moment, what is the solution? And I'm not just talking about when it comes to BSL. We have tens of thousands of bull breeds in every rescue and pound in this country, all over the place. Thousands a week that are euthanized because nobody comes forward for them. And yet tens of thousands of new dogs are being bred.
Yeah, and all the dogs in the pounds are coming from breeders, aren't they?
There's always been money that's changed hands, and that money is never put back into the system. Millions and billions come out in terms of dog sales. But going back to the point that we were talking about earlier, certain people are worried about the cost of exemption, but some of these people have paid £5,000 for their puppy. Well, that's more than this dog will ever cost you in exemption for the rest of their life. So you've got, money isn't the problem, is it? And someone's made a very good living off this. So there should be some responsibility there. And I mean, I don't know whether you'd have any recourse, but I say this to everyone in the last 6 months that's brought an XL Bully that's got papers, go back to your breeder and say, what are you doing about this legislation change then? Because you knew, as I knew 2 years ago that this was coming. I mean, we didn't know for sure when it was going to happen, but it's been on the cards for a long time. This isn't a new topic. This has been talked about for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even tell you right now how many rescues are breaking their hearts because they've got these dogs in kennels. The thing that people need to understand is that when a dog is in rescue, if they are deemed type, if, let's just say, the organisation has sanctuary facilities where the dog can live for a very long period of time or for the rest of their life comfortably, let's just say they have that, and they exempt that dog to themselves, you can't change keepership. That dog then can never be rehomed. So what they don't want is for these dogs who are homeable, who are friendly, loving, gorgeous dogs, which we know that the XL Bullies are, they are, yeah, and a lot of them are not even XL Bullies, they just fall under this type. So it's horrendous what's going to have to happen. There's dogs in stray pounds that rescues now can't take. This gridlock is absolutely horrendous. I can't even tell you from a rescue's perspective how bad this is. And it's not just that breed. Obviously, that is our main concern right now because these dogs are going to lose their lives. But there are hundreds and thousands of dogs being euthanized in the UK who are pedigree cockapoos, who are pugs, who are Frenchies, who are all sorts of breeds. So Obviously, this is a discussion for another day, but I think we will be doing a discussion with some of our behaviourists about the fact that actually is any kind of breeding ethical, whether we're talking spaniels, labradors, XL bullies, is any kind of breeding really ethical with the state of the rescue crisis today. But that is going to be another video about the rescue crisis and what can we do to stop.
Yeah, the only thing that I did remember, I've just remembered whilst you were talking about potentially then, is I've saw quite a lot of people talking on TikTok where obviously their dog's not an XL bully and they're worried. And I can absolutely understand their concern, because far more dogs that are actually then returned because they're not tied are seized every year than those that are kept. Like, the mistakes that are made outweigh the classifications, so you've got to expect that consistency going forward. So there are going to be lots of other dogs that fit this criteria that aren't XL bullies. It's based on what the DLO says at the time, and then it's based on what decision the magistrate makes on a court. You kind of got, once this happens, you have got no real power other than to show your intent and to oblige and do everything that's asked of you. Everything else is kind of out of your hands, and I think it's not going to do anyone any favors going forward to keep listening to the people that are actually causing this problem. Of course, the breeders are going to misinform everyone, because the last thing that they want is thousands of people that they've took thousands of pounds on going, hang on a minute, you sold me a line. So of course they want to play it down, and this is their income. This is precisely the problem. So they need to accept some responsibility. And if you are a good breeder who's going to get annoyed by some of the things I said, prove me wrong, put your money where your mouth is, and start supporting some of the people that gave you thousands of pounds for a dog not so long ago. And prove me wrong. Show me that you're actually decent people.
Yeah, this is obviously a really emotive topic, especially for someone
absolutely
like
and I know that I've got very stern views about it, but that's because I've seen the amount of bull breeds that have been put down that you wish that you could go in and say, look, I'll take the lot. You can't, and so they're all getting euthanized at the end of the week because no one cared about them, because they were too busy spending thousands of pounds on a dog. Like, it does get frustrating, and then those same people are the ones that want the most sympathy when these rules get changed, when they've put themselves in this position knowingly, made a good living from doing so, and now they want the world to stop and look after them. And I'm sorry, but there does need to be some acknowledgement and repercussions for this, because otherwise it won't change. Next year they'll add a different breed onto the list. Like, hypothetically, next year we could be talking about the pocket bully being added to the list, and all the next 12 months or so, pocket bullies are going to get sold like things because they're not illegal. And this is all the breeders will be thinking about, or they'll bring out another one, add another letter before the word, and it'll be a different breed. But they're still profiting from something that we know is fundamentally wrong. That's what's got changed. That understanding that this is the problem. Whilst we continue to use them as objects like this, nothing will change, ever.
Thank you for your time, Andy. I really appreciate it. Yeah, if anyone does have any questions with regards to what life looks like with an exempted dog, please do send them in. Wherever you're watching this, leave a comment, send us a message. This will be on various different platforms, but yeah, and if you do need support, then please do get in touch, and we'll see where we can signpost you depending on what it is that you need help with. So
yeah, I mean, I would just end on the note that anybody can do this. Anybody, regardless of your background, whatever potential financial situation you're in. If your dog is someone that you want in your life, you can fight for them and you can win. I promise.
If money really is that much of a problem and you really can't afford it, reach out to some of these groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to reiterate, we're not talking about huge case of money here. I mean, we did a worst case scenario and it was still under £1,000 for the most expensive of absolutely everything. And this is a one-off fee. This is not yearly, this is not monthly. This is to make sure that your dog is safe for the remainder of their life. So yeah, it's well worth it. And like I said, a lot of it is intent. If you've genuinely got no money, you're on benefits, on your universal credit, whatever, you've got nothing coming in, go and speak to the PDSA, go and speak to the Dogs Trust, explain your situation, work out a payment plan. Both will support you, and use those letters of intent to show exactly your intent. Like, what the worst thing that you can do in this situation from a DLO's position is make no effort whatsoever. If you sit there and decide that you can't win this case, so you might as well give up before you're started, then you're giving them everything that they want. You can absolutely win this, and I'm talking to anybody without legal representation, without loads of money in the bank. You can absolutely fight and win for you can. So don't think that you can't. Like, I don't think anyone should be taking their dog to the vets or at this stage. If you've already gone through the motions and you're in then obviously that's the system. But at this stage in life, nobody should be having those thoughts. There should be ways that you can raise the money or sort something out or whatever. Or there's still a few weeks for you to find a new place for the dog to reside if there's a problem with an address. All these different things. There's still a little bit of time on your hands, but be proactive about it. No matter how much we bang and shout and moan about how draconian it is or how it shouldn't happen, it is happening. So we need to do what we can to be prepared for it.
Thank you.